I worked for over a decade to put my younger brother through his Ph.D., even sold my house to help with his $40,000 wedding gift. Then, standing at the microphone on his big day, he announced to everyone that he owed his success entirely to himself. When they handed me the mic, one sentence cleared the room. "Liam, the down payment for that suit on your back came from me selling my house. My name is 𝐒𝐓𝐎𝐑𝐘. I'm 32, running 3 clothing stores back in our small hometown. The business keeps me comfortable enough, nothing fancy, but the bills get paid. My younger brother Liam is 7 years younger. At 25, he just finished his doctorate in materials science from one of those name-brand universities on the East Coast. A future so bright you'd need sunglasses to look at it. Today was his wedding to Sophia Sterling. Her family's in commercial real estate, old money, the kind that multiplies quietly across generations. The wedding was at one of the most expensive hotels in the city. Crystal chandeliers dripping light onto tables draped in ivory linen. 500 guests in gowns and tuxedos that cost more than my annual rent. I sat at the table closest to the head table, close enough to the stage to see every detail. My place card read, 𝐒𝐓𝐎𝐑𝐘, sister of the groom. Which was funny, really, because none of Sophia's people had the faintest idea who I was. The card was the only reason anyone might know. My dress was a pale blue shift I'd bought last month, 50% off. $53. The nicest thing hanging in my closet. The woman seated next to me, Sophia's cousin, wore a watch I recognized from a magazine, $28,000, give or take. It caught the chandelier light and threw tiny prisms across the tablecloth every time she lifted her champagne glass. I tucked my bare wrist under the table and tried not to think about it. The MC was a local TV personality, slick and polished, the kind of guy who could make a grocery list sound like a TED Talk. He worked the room like a conductor, building up to the groom's speech with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Liam took the microphone like he'd been born holding one. His eyes swept across the ballroom, the slow, deliberate scan of a man surveying his kingdom, before settling on his bride. The look he gave her was so tender, so perfectly calibrated, it could have been workshopped. "First," he said, his voice resonating through the sound system, warm and commanding, "I want to thank my new parents, William and Margaret Sterling. Thank you for entrusting me with your extraordinary daughter. Thank you for your faith in me, your support, your generosity. I will spend the rest of my life striving to be worthy of her." William and Margaret beamed from the head table, nodding with the satisfied grace of people who just watched their investment pay off exactly as projected. "Second," Liam continued, turning toward our parents, his voice softening just enough to register as sincere, "I want to thank my mother and father. You raised me with love, with sacrifice. We never had much, but you gave me everything you could. I carry that with me every single day." Mom's eyes were already glistening. Dad's jaw was tight, the way it gets when he's trying not to cry. I watched Mom dab at her cheek with a napkin and felt something twist in my chest, something between tenderness and a bone-deep weariness. And finally, Liam said, drawing himself up. His voice swelled, filling every corner of the room. "I stand here today because of one thing, my own effort. My own perseverance. My own refusal to quit." The applause erupted. Enthusiastic. Genuine. 500 people clapping for the self-made man. From our small town to a top-tier university. From undergrad through to my doctorate. Every step of the way, I walked alone. I relied on no one. Everything I have, everything I am, I built with my own 2 hands. More applause. A few people even stood. I watched Sophia squeeze his hand, her eyes shining with tears of admiration. I sat frozen in my chair. The air in the ballroom had gone thin, like the oxygen had been slowly sucked out and nobody had noticed yet. My fingers tightened around my water glass. The condensation was cold against my palm. "The hardest years," Liam said, and now his voice caught, a perfectly timed catch, the kind that makes audiences lean in, were graduate school. I was so broke I ate 2 meals a day. Plain bread, whatever free soup the dining hall had left over. When my roommates ordered takeout, I'd hide in the library so they wouldn't see me pretending I wasn't hungry. He paused, letting the weight of it settle over the room. Several women were dabbing at their eyes. Sophia was crying openly now, beautiful crystalline tears that didn't smudge her makeup. But I never complained. Not once. Because I knew that hard work would get me where I wanted to go. That I could change my destiny through sheer force of will. So to every young person in this room, Liam said, his voice rising, to everyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, not rich enough, not connected enough, I'm here to tell you, don't blame where you came from. Don't waste time feeling sorry for yourself. If you work hard enough, if you want it badly enough, you can achieve anything. I'm living proof. The room exploded. A standing ovation. Thunderous applause rolling across the ballroom in waves. I stared down at the pale gold liquid in my glass. 2 meals a day. Yes, that part was true. He'd lost so much weight those 3 years, his cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. $3,000 a month I sent him for living expenses, $2,000 of which he'd funnel back home to help with Mom's medical bills. The bread and free soup, true. He'd text me constantly about how watery the soup was getting. What he'd never mentioned in his texts was that every single time he complained, my response was a transfer notification on his phone. 500 here, 300 there, whatever I could scrape together after paying the shop rent, always with the same note, get yourself something decent to eat. And hiding from his takeout ordering roommates. True. He'd called me crying more than once about the shame of it. So his sophomore year, I'd taken out a high-interest loan and bought him a top-of-the-line laptop, $1,300, so he could stay in his room, work, play games, exist without the humiliation of being the poor kid. Everything I have, I built alone. The words were still echoing in my ears. I looked up at the stage. At the man in the custom Italian suit that cost more than some cars. At my brother, who was suddenly, jarringly, a stranger. The MC was visibly moved. He took the microphone back, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. What an incredible story. Dr. Chen has given us all a masterclass in perseverance and determination. Now, let's invite the groom's sister, Ms. Aria Chen, to come up and share a few words of blessing for the happy couple. Aria. The spotlight swung toward me. Blinding white light. 500 heads turning in my direction. I rose slowly from my chair. Set down my glass. My dress had wrinkled across my lap. I smoothed it carefully, deliberately, buying myself the seconds I needed to arrange my face into something resembling a smile. Then I walked toward the stage. My heels sank into the plush carpet, silent as footsteps on fresh snow. The walk felt endless and not nearly long enough. When Liam saw me approaching, something flickered across his face, a tightening around the eyes, a microscopic flinch, before the camera-ready smile snapped back into place. He handed me the microphone with the casual grace of someone passing a canopy. "Sis," he said, his voice carrying that slight edge of impatience I'd learned to recognize over the years, "say a few words." The microphone was cold against my fingers. I looked out at the sea of faces. My parents, at the table below, were staring at me with wide, pleading eyes. Don't. Please, don't. The silent prayer of people who knew exactly what I was capable of in this moment. Beside them, William and Margaret Sterling wore the polite, distant smiles of the truly wealthy, the smiles of people who'd never had to worry about anything money couldn't fix. Behind them, Sophia's extended family glittered in their finery, appraising me with the cool curiosity of collectors examining an unremarkable piece at auction. I cleared my throat. The sound echoed through the sound system, and 500 people went quiet. Good evening, everyone. I'm Arya Chin, Liam's older sister. I paused, letting the silence stretch. My brother just told you that everything he achieved alone. Every step of the way, he relied on no one but himself. I turned to face him. His smile had gone rigid at the edges, the way ice goes brittle just before it cracks. That's true, I said. And it's also not true. A ripple went through the crowd. A collective intake of breath, the rustle of silk and satin as people shifted in their seats. Liam did work incredibly hard. I can testify to that. His senior year of high school, he slept 4 hours a night. In winter, our house had no heating. His hands would crack and bleed from the cold, and he'd keep studying anyway. He wanted that college admission more than anything. I saw Liam's shoulders drop slightly. Relief. He thought I was building him up. However, I said, and the word landed like a stone in still water, when he says he relied on no one, I'm afraid I can't let that stand. The silence that fell over the ballroom was absolute. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat. Liam's eyes went wide. He stepped toward me, hand reaching for the microphone, but I turned smoothly away, as if I hadn't noticed. Liam, do you remember sophomore year? My voice was calm, conversational. You'd been eyeing your roommate's sneakers. Limited edition, $300. You called me sobbing, because you'd never owned a single pair of decent shoes in your life. You told me you couldn't face your classmates anymore. The color was draining from Liam's face, leaving it the shade of old paper. I'd been saving for 6 months to renew the lease on my shop. I sent you $420 instead. You bought the sneakers, and with what was left over, you treated your whole dorm floor to dinner. Then you texted me, I still have the message, telling me your roommates finally stopped making fun of you. A murmur was building in the crowd now, soft and dangerous as a riptide. Liam lunged for the microphone again, his composure shattering. I stepped back, and the MC hurried forward, his professional smile gone panicky around the edges. I think the sister is perhaps a little overwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed, I said, cutting him off without looking at him. My eyes stayed on the crowd. I'm simply stating a few facts. During Liam's 3 years of graduate school, he received $3,000 a month for living expenses. But $2,000 of that went straight back home every month. Our mother was ill, her medication alone cost over $200, and our father's pension was barely $300 a month. I glanced at Mom. She had her head down now, shoulders shaking, napkin pressed against her face. He really did eat 2 meals a day. Bread and soup. What he didn't mention is that every time he told me how hard things were, I sent him whatever I could. 300, 500, sometimes more. Over those 3 years, I transferred him just under $10,000. I have every receipt. Every single one. The murmuring rose to a low roar. I watched Sophia's face transform, the bridal glow draining away, replaced by something sharp and watchful. She was staring at Liam now like she'd never seen him before. And that laptop, I continued. He told you he hid in the library because his roommates ordered takeout. The truth is, He called me crying because everyone on his hall had new computers, and he was still using the ancient second-hand model from high school. It took 5 minutes just to boot up. His roommates laughed at him. So I took out a loan, one of those predatory ones with interest rates that should be illegal, and I bought him the newest model on the market. $1,300. My voice caught, just for a moment. I forced it steady. It took me 2 years to pay off that loan. 2 years of sleeping 5 hours a night. During the day I ran my shop. At night I worked a stall at the night market. In winter, the skin on my hands split open from the cold. Blood on everything I touched. In summer, the heat was so brutal I nearly collapsed twice. But I never complained either. Not once. Because he was my little brother. I looked at Liam. His face had gone from white to gray. Beads of sweat stood out on his forehead, catching the light like tiny accusation marks. But none of that matters, really. You're my brother. Putting you through school, I did it willingly. Happily, even. Mom and Dad are getting older, their health is fragile, and as the older sister, taking care of the family was always my job. I made my peace with that a long time ago. What I can't make peace with, I said, my voice dropping, is you standing up here at your own wedding, in front of 500 people, and claiming you built all of this yourself. As if I never existed. As if my sacrifice meant nothing. I drew a breath so deep it hurt. You erased me, Liam. You erased the sister who paid your tuition when Mom and Dad couldn't. Who's 32 years old and has never been in a serious relationship because there was never time, never money, never space for anyone else. Who passed up 3 opportunities to expand her business because you needed textbooks and lab fees and just a little extra this month. Who paid off your student loans while living in a rental the size of a shoebox, $800 a month, mold in the bathroom and a hot plate for a kitchen. My voice had started to tremble. I locked my knees and forced it steady. You don't have to thank me. I stopped expecting gratitude years ago. But you do not get to rewrite history. You do not get to pretend I wasn't there. I looked directly at him now, the microphone forgotten in my hand. That suit you're wearing. It cost more than a down payment on a house. The down payment I've been saving for 7 years, for a little place of my own, that I gave to you instead. This wedding. Over $40,000, and 25 of it came directly from my store's cash flow. And when your in-laws opposed the marriage, when they looked at you and saw a boy from nowhere with nothing to his name, who do you think flew out here with every cent she had in the world? $43,762.43. I put it on their coffee table. I looked William and Margaret Sterling in the eye and I said, this is my brother. He doesn't have money, but he has potential. This is a gesture of good faith from our family to yours. I shifted my gaze to the head table. William Sterling's face had gone the color of a thundercloud. Margaret's mouth was a thin, bloodless line. They accepted, I said. They accepted the money. That's why this wedding is happening at all. So tell me, Liam. I turned back to him. He was trembling, literally trembling, like a man standing on the edge of a very high place. You say you achieved everything through your own hard work. Explain to me, to all these people, how you'd be standing here today without that $43,000. Without the tens of thousands I sent you over the years. Without the down payment that bought the suit on your back. Explain how any of this happens without me. I let the silence hang. It was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I'm not asking for thanks. I'm not even asking for acknowledgement anymore. But I am asking you, Just this once, to stop lying. The quiet that followed was suffocating. Liam's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Beside him, Sophia had taken a small, almost imperceptible step backward. The distance between them was barely a foot, but it might as well have been a canyon. The emcee stood frozen, microphone dangling uselessly at his side, his face a study in professional disaster. I lifted the microphone one last time. My voice came out soft, almost gentle. Oh, and one more thing. Liam told you his hardest years were graduate school, surviving on 2 meals a day. That's not quite true. His hardest year was senior year of college. He'd failed 3 core classes, too much time gaming, not enough time in the lab. He was about to lose his degree. He called me from his dorm room threatening to jump out the window. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I took the overnight train. Got there at dawn. I stood outside his building for hours in the freezing cold, no coat, because I'd run out the door too fast to grab one, begging him through the door to let me in. The next day, I went with him to every single professor. I pleaded. I cried. I came about 2 inches from getting on my knees. We paid the retake fees, $5,000, which was supposed to be the startup capital for my second store, and I hired him the best tutor I could find. He scraped through by the skin of his teeth. I looked at Liam. He was staring at me with red-rimmed eyes, something raw and desperate swimming in them. You didn't forget about that, did you, Liam? I handed the microphone back to the shell-shocked emcee. Then I turned and walked off the stage, my heels making no sound on the thick carpet. It seemed even the floor was holding its breath. I'd almost made it back to my table when the voice cut through the silence. Wait. William Sterling was on his feet. His face had gone beyond anger into something harder, the cold fury of a man who'd just discovered he'd been played for a fool, in public, at his own daughter's wedding. Miss Chin. The $43,000. Explain. Now. The ballroom held its breath. 500 people, utterly motionless. Liam scrambled off the stage, nearly tripping over his own feet, and stumbled toward his father-in-law. William, Dad, it's not what you think. My sister, she's emotional, she's always been jealous of me, she made up. I didn't ask you. William didn't even glance at him. His eyes were fixed on me like a targeting system. Miss Chin. The money. I stopped walking. Turned back around. Liam was behind William now, gesturing frantically at me, begging, threatening, I couldn't tell which. I pretended not to see. Last October, I said, my voice level and polite, Liam brought Sophia home to meet you and Mrs. Sterling. Afterward, he called me. He said you had concerns. You felt he came from too humble a background. You worried Sophia would struggle financially if she married him. He was crying, sobbing, really, saying he'd worked his whole life to be good enough and it still wasn't enough. He said you'd set a condition. Either he buy a house here, which was impossible, he'd barely started his job, or he provide a good faith payment of roughly $70,000 to prove he could support your daughter. William's jaw was working. Margaret had risen now too, her face a mask of cold fury. Liam had just graduated. His job hadn't even started. He had a few $1,000s to his name. He called me and said, Arya, please. I've never loved anyone like this. I'll pay you back 10 times over. Just help me this once. I had $43,000 in my savings account. 7 years of scrimping, the down payment on a small apartment I'd been dreaming about since I was 25. I took it all out in cash, put it in a duffel bag, and flew out here. I paused. The memory was so vivid it burned, the weight of the duffel bag on my lap, the cramped economy seat, the way I'd clutched it against my chest the whole flight like it contained my internal organs. I sat in your living room. I put the bag on your coffee table. I said, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, my brother doesn't have money yet, but he's a good man. He's smart, he's hardworking, he has a bright future. This is everything I have. It's not a dowry, it's for Sophia, for her security, to use however she wants. I told you it was a gesture of family support, of good faith. You asked me if the money was from our parents. I said yes. Because I was afraid if I told you it was just me, you'd think less of him. William's face had gone nearly purple. Liam. The name cracked through the ballroom like a whip. Is this true? Did your sister give you that money? Liam was shaking so badly I could see it from 10 feet away. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Answer me. Yes. The word was barely audible. A mouse's squeak. Yes, but I was going to. Going to what? William's voice could have frozen water. Going to let us believe it was family money. Going to lie about your sister's involvement. What exactly were you going to do? I asked you, William continued, each word dropping like a stone, when you brought us that money, I asked you specifically. Was this your savings or family support? And what did you tell me? Liam's face had crumpled. Tears were running freely now, streaking down his cheeks in uneven tracks. I said I'd saved it. From my research stipend. And my parents helped a little. And your sister. Silence. What did you tell me about your sister? That she had a small business back home. That she got by okay. That we weren't really close. Financially, I mean. Financially. William repeated the word like it was something foul he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. He turned to his wife. Margaret. Did you know about any of this? Margaret's face was stone. She didn't answer her husband. Instead, she turned to her daughter. Sophia. Did you know? Sophia stood frozen on the stage, a marble statue in a wedding dress. Tears had begun to fall, tracking through her carefully applied makeup. She looked at the man kneeling on the floor, her almost husband, the love of her life, and shook her head, very slowly. He told me he'd saved it himself, she whispered. He said his sister was, that she wasn't really part of his life. That she couldn't help. That she didn't have anything to give. William Sterling let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a growl. Miss Chin. The $43,000 will be returned to you in full. Additionally, he turned to survey the ruined wedding, the horrified guests, his weeping daughter. I failed to teach my daughter better judgment. That's on me. This wedding is over. Dad. Liam's voice cracked. He scrambled toward William on his knees. Dad, please. Do not call me that. William shook him off with a violent motion and turned to the emcee. Announce it. The wedding is cancelled. All costs will be covered by the Sterling family. He strode toward the exit without looking back. His wife followed, pausing only to wrap a protective arm around Sophia, who was sobbing now in great heaving gasps. This marriage, Margaret said, her voice carrying in the silence, was built on lies. We don't do lies. The Sterling relatives began to rise. First Sophia's uncle, his face thunderous. Then her aunts, her cousins, the extended network of a powerful family withdrawing as one. No one spoke. The only sounds were the scrape of chairs, the rustle of expensive fabric, and Sophia's muffled sobs. Within a minute, 5 tables stood completely empty. Liam was still on the floor. His perfect suit was rumpled now, his hair disheveled, his face blotchy with tears and humiliation. He looked up at me, and the expression on his face shifted, from shock, to despair, to something harder. Something that looked almost like hatred. "Sis." His voice was a rasp. "Are you happy now?" I said nothing. "You ruined my wedding." He scrambled to his feet, fury replacing grief in an instant. His finger jabbed toward me. "You're happy now, right? You've always been jealous. You couldn't stand to see me succeed, could you? You had to tear me down in front of everyone." "Liam." Dad's voice cut through like a thunderclap. He was on his feet, shaking with rage. "How dare you speak to your sister that way? How dare I?" Liam was nearly screaming now, wild-eyed, a cornered animal. "She planned this. She waited until the wedding, until everyone was here, and then she humiliated me. She could have said something in private. She could have talked to me. But no, she wanted to destroy me. She's always wanted to destroy me." I spoke then. My voice was quieter than I expected. Calmer. "And you?" I said. "You stood on that stage in front of 500 people and told them you'd never relied on anyone. You erased 15 years of my life with a single sentence. Your dignity matters. What about my sacrifice? Did that matter at all?" He stared at me. Something flickered in his eyes, a crack in the armor of his self-righteousness. "I've been supporting you since you were 8 years old," I said. "When Mom and Dad's health started failing, I took over. Your tuition. Your living expenses. Your emergencies. Your mistakes. You called, and I came running. Every single time. The $6,800 during graduate school, I never expected it back. The laptop, the retake fees, the wedding money, I gave it freely. You're my brother. That's what family does. But in all those years, in all those phone calls, in all those thank you texts that were never more than 2 words long, did you ever once really see me? Did you ever once think about what it cost me?" I paused. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't bother to wipe it away. I'm 32 years old. I've never traveled. I've never bought myself anything nicer than a clearance rack dress. I've never been in love, really in love, because when would I have had the time? Every ounce of energy I had went to you. And I did it willingly. I did it with love. But you don't get to stand up there and pretend none of it happened. You don't get to erase me. Your suit. The down payment from my house. This wedding, the $25,000 I contributed. Your bride, the $43,000 I gave her parents. All of it was me. And you said, with a straight face, that you'd done it all yourself. Where, I said, and my voice was barely a whisper now, is your conscience, Liam? The 3 words landed like blows. Liam's face crumpled. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out except a choked, strangled sound. "Arya," Mom was stumbling toward me, tears streaming down her face. "Arya, please." But I was already walking. Past the empty Sterling tables. Past the horrified remaining guests. Past the staff frozen mid-service with champagne bottles dangling from their hands. "Arya." Mom's voice behind me. Please. He's your brother. I didn't look back. The evening air hit my face like a slap. Early autumn, and the cold had teeth. I fumbled for my phone and ordered a car. By the time it arrived, I'd stopped shaking, or maybe I'd just gone numb. I sank into the back seat and let my head fall against the window. The city lights blurred past, all that wealth and glitter, all those lives so different from mine. My phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number. The preview showed, "Miss Chin, this is William Sterling. I'd like to discuss." I closed the message without reading it. My lock screen glowed up at me. The photo I'd never changed, me at 15, Liam at 8. My arm around his skinny shoulders. He was holding up a Student of the Month certificate, grinning with the gap-toothed smile of a kid who still believed his big sister could fix anything. When had he stopped being that boy? Was it the first time I sent him money and his reply was a single word? Was it the visit where he wouldn't let me near his dorm, embarrassed by my off-brand clothes and small-town accent? Was it the Christmas he'd thanked everyone in the family group chat except me, and I'd still sent him an extra $200 with a heart emoji? I'd told myself he was just growing up. That he was busy. That boys weren't good at expressing feelings. I'd made every excuse in the book. But today, watching him on that stage, watching him claim, with absolute conviction, that he'd done it all himself, I finally understood. He wasn't ungrateful. He was ashamed. Ashamed of where he came from. Ashamed of the sister who'd sacrificed everything for him. I wasn't part of his origin story. I was the part he was trying to erase. My phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. I turned it off. The highway stretched ahead, dark and endless. I rolled down the window and let the wind whip against my face, cold and sharp and cleansing. By the time I reached the train station, my tears had dried to salt. I bought a ticket on the last train home. The station was nearly empty at this hour. I found a seat in the waiting area and finally let myself look at my phone. 73 unread messages. The family group chat was on fire. Aunt Linda, Aria, how could you be so cruel? On his wedding day. Uncle Paul, we're ashamed of you. Cousin after cousin piling on, each message a small knife. And then there was Liam's message. A long, rambling voice note that I almost deleted without listening. But some masochistic impulse made me press play. His voice was hoarse from crying, "Aria, please. I know I messed up. I know what I said was wrong. But please, please, you have to fix this. You have to call Sophia's parents and tell them you made it up. Tell them you were jealous. Tell them anything. Just make them believe me. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll pay you back everything, I swear. Please, Aria, you're my sister." I stopped the playback. Even now. Even after everything. He still couldn't see it. He still thought this was about the money. He still thought I existed to clean up his messes. I deleted the message. Then I blocked his number. Then Mom's. Then Dad's. One by one, I blocked every relative who'd told me I was the problem. The train arrived. I found my seat by the window and watched the city recede into darkness. Somewhere out there, my little brother was facing the consequences of his own actions for the first time in his life. And I, for the first time in mine, wasn't going to rescue him. The next morning, I woke up in my tiny rental apartment and lay staring at the ceiling for a long time. Cracks in the plaster, water stains in the corner. $800 a month for this shoebox, and I'd lived here for 6 years while my brother's rent in his luxury grad student housing was triple that, paid for, of course, by me. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and went to my stores. I have 3 locations, 2 on the main shopping street, 1 near the school. I walked through each one slowly, running my hands over the racks of clothing I'd selected myself, breathing in the familiar scent of fabric and commerce. Jenny, my longest employee, 5 years, loyal as they come, took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. She just made me a cup of tea and said, "Boss, you look like hell. Go rest." "I've got this." I didn't rest. I spent the morning going over the books, inventory lists, supplier contracts. By afternoon, I'd made a decision. I texted Ethan Joe, "I'm in." Ethan was my college classmate. My first boyfriend, actually, though that was a lifetime ago. We'd stayed friends after the breakup that happened because he'd wanted to move to the city and build a fashion import business, and I'd needed to stay home to take care of my family. He'd done well for himself. Very well. And he'd been trying to recruit me for years. His reply came almost instantly, finally. "When?" "Tomorrow. I'll send you the details. Buy me dinner." "You got it." That evening, I packed. My whole life fit into 3 cardboard boxes. 3 boxes for 32 years. Clothes. A few books. Some photographs I couldn't bear to throw away, including the one of me and Liam, the one on my lock screen, the one I still couldn't bring myself to delete even though looking at it felt like pressing on a bruise. I was zipping up the last box when my phone buzzed again. William Sterling, again. This time I read the whole message. "Miss Chen, Aria, I know this is an imposition, but I would very much like to speak with you in person. There are things that need to be said, and I believe they should be said face to face. Please let me know if you'd be willing to meet. I can come to you, or you're welcome here. Whatever is most comfortable." I stared at the screen. William Sterling, the man whose daughter I just publicly humiliated, wanted to meet. To do what? Threaten me. Sue me. But there was something in the tone of the message that didn't read as hostile. Formal, yes. Angry. Maybe. But not hostile. I wrote back, "I'll be in the city tomorrow. Coffee? 3 p.m. His reply was immediate, "Name the place." The train ride the next day felt different. Maybe it was the lack of luggage. Maybe it was the lack of expectations. Maybe it was just the strange lightness of having burned every bridge behind me and finding, to my surprise, that I was still standing. Ethan met me at the station. He looked good, better than good. The years had sharpened him, given him an edge of confidence that the shy college boy I'd dated had never possessed. Tailored blazer, expensive watch, the easy posture of someone who'd made it. But his smile was the same. "Aria." He pulled me into a hug without hesitation. "You look exhausted." "Thanks. You really know how to make a girl feel special. Come on." He grabbed my bag. "Food first. Business later." He took me to a quiet restaurant in a converted warehouse, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, the kind of place where everything on the menu was organic and locally sourced. Over lunch, I told him the whole story. He listened without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "So you're finally done." "I'm finally done." "Good." He signaled the waiter for more coffee. "About damn time." So, your stores. I know the locations, I know the numbers. 280,000 for all three, including inventory and your supplier relationships. You come work for me as head of sourcing. Base salary 70,000 plus performance bonuses. Full benefits. What do you say? I blinked. 280,000 was more than fair. The salary was generous. He'd clearly put thought into this. This wasn't a pity offer, it was a business proposition. Ethan, And before you say anything, he cut in, holding up a hand, this isn't charity. I've been trying to hire you for years. You're the best buyer I know. Your eye for trends is sharper than anyone on my current team, and your supplier negotiation skills are frankly terrifying. I need you. This is capitalism, Arya. Pure self-interest. Despite everything, I laughed. Okay. Okay, I'm in. He grinned and raised his coffee cup. To new beginnings. I clinked my cup against his. To new beginnings. At exactly 3 o'clock, I walked into the hotel cafe where I'd agreed to meet William Sterling. He was already there, seated at a corner table with a cup of black coffee. He stood when he saw me, old school manners, the kind that are bred in the bone. Miss Chin. Thank you for coming. I sat down across from him. Up close, he looked less like the imposing patriarch from the wedding and more like a tired man in his 60s who'd had a very bad weekend. I owe you an apology, he said, and I nearly dropped my menu. Mr. Sterling. Please. Let me finish. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I've spent the last 2 days asking my daughter a lot of questions. And making some phone calls. I know about the loans you took out. I know about the medical bills. I know about the jobs you worked, the night market, the extra shifts, the years of wearing the same clothes so your brother could have new ones. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't expected this. Anger, yes. Recriminations, probably. Not this quiet, grave sincerity. I've been in business a long time, he continued. I've met a lot of people. And I have to tell you, I have rarely encountered someone with your level of commitment. Your brother made some very bad choices. But you, he paused, searching for the word. You did everything right. And you were treated appallingly. By him. And, I'm ashamed to say, by us. I shook my head. You didn't know. That's not an excuse. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. He slid it across the table. The 43,000. I had it converted to a cashier's check. It's all there. I stared at the envelope. Mr. Sterling, I can't take this. I gave that money freely. It was a gift. It was given under false pretenses. His voice was firm but not unkind. My family doesn't keep money obtained through deception. And, he hesitated. I've spoken with my daughter. At length. She's devastated, obviously. But she's also grateful. She told me that if you hadn't spoken up, she would have married a man she didn't really know. A man capable of erasing his own sister to make himself look better. You saved her from that. So consider this, if not repayment, then a thank you gift. I reached for the envelope with fingers that weren't quite steady. I don't know what to say. There's one more thing. He withdrew another document from his jacket. I own a garment factory. It's not glamorous, but it's solid. I've done some research on you, Miss Chen. Those 3 stores of yours, they're turning over nearly $500,000 a year in a town with a fraction of the market here. That's impressive. I'd like to offer you a position. Operations Director. You'd be based here, with occasional trips to the factory. Salary negotiable. Full executive benefits. My mouth actually fell open. Mr. Sterling, yesterday I accepted a job with a friend's company. I can't. I understand. He didn't look surprised. Keep the offer. If things change, or if you're ever looking for something different, the door is open. Not out of pity, Miss Chen. Out of respect. People with your kind of character are rare. I'd be a fool not to try to hire you. I looked at this man, this intimidating, powerful man who just offered me a lifeline with no strings attached, and felt something crack open in my chest. Not grief, exactly. Something closer to hope. Thank you, I said. I can't accept the job. But I'll take the respect. He smiled then, a real smile, and for the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look like a titan of industry. He just looked like a dad. Fair enough. Now, let me buy you a real drink. You look like you could use one. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Ethan's company was bigger than I'd realized, a full-scale operation with design, manufacturing, and distribution arms. My role was exactly what he'd promised: sourcing materials, managing supplier relationships, keeping the supply chain humming. It was challenging and exhausting and exactly what I needed. I found an apartment, a real one, with sunlight and a bedroom that wasn't also the living room. It was more than I'd ever spent on rent, and for the first few weeks, I felt guilty every time I wrote the check. Old habits, I suppose. The voice in my head that said I didn't deserve nice things because Liam might need something. But Liam didn't need me anymore. Or if he did, that was his problem now. Ethan and I fell into an easy rhythm. Work lunches that stretched into strategy sessions. Strategy sessions that turned into late dinners. Dinners that sometimes ended with us walking along the river, talking about everything and nothing, the way we used to in college. He never pushed. He never asked for more than I was ready to give. But I caught him looking at me sometimes, a certain expression on his face that I remembered from years ago, and I knew he was waiting. For what, I wasn't sure yet. The calls from home kept coming for a while. Mom, mostly. Sometimes Dad. I let them go to voicemail. The messages were variations on a theme: *, please call us. Please forgive your brother. Please come home. Family is family, *. I deleted them all. Then, about a month after the wedding, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Aria. Dad's voice, but older. Tired. Your mother and I are in the city. We need to see you. I felt my stomach drop. What? Why? Liam's missing. He's been gone 2 weeks. We've looked everywhere. The police won't help. He's an adult, they say. He has the right to disappear. But he has no money, no job, nowhere to go. Aria, please. We don't know what to do. I closed my eyes. The old reflex kicked in immediately, the urge to fix it, to drop everything and start making phone calls, to be the responsible one again. I forced it down. Where are you staying? He gave me the address of a budget motel near the train station. I told him I'd be there in an hour and hung up before he could say thank you. Ethan found me in my office, staring at my computer screen without seeing it. What's wrong? My parents are here. Liam's disappeared. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, do you want me to come with you? You don't have to. Arya. He crouched down beside my chair so he could meet my eyes. I'm not letting you face them alone. Let's go. The motel was as grim as I'd expected, flickering fluorescent lights, stained carpet, the smell of cigarettes and despair. Mom and Dad were sitting on the edge of a sagging double bed. They looked smaller than I remembered. Diminished. Mom burst into tears the moment she saw me. Arya, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I failed you. I know I asked too much. But he's my son, and he's gone, and I don't know what to do. I let her cry. I didn't hug her, but I didn't pull away either. Progress, I suppose. They told me the story in fragments. After the wedding, Liam had come home. He'd locked himself in his room for days. Then one morning he was gone, a note on the desk saying he was going to try to win Sophia back. That was the last anyone had heard from him. He's probably still here, I said. If he came to find Sophia, he wouldn't have left the city. We've tried everything. Dad's voice cracked. We called Sophia's family. They won't speak to us. We went to his old workplace. They said he'd been let go weeks ago. We don't know anyone here. We don't have any resources. Arya, we know we don't deserve your help. But please. Just help us find him. Then we'll leave you alone. We promise. I looked at my parents, really looked at them. At the deep lines in Dad's face, the gray in Mom's hair that I'd never noticed before. They were old. They were tired. They had made so many mistakes. But they were still my parents. I'll make some calls, I said. But this is the last time. After this, I'm done. Do you understand? They nodded, grateful and broken, and I walked out of the motel room feeling like I'd just volunteered to carry a weight I'd spent a month trying to put down. Ethan's network turned out to be useful in ways I hadn't anticipated. He made a few calls, and within hours we had a lead. Liam had been seen at Sophia's apartment building, first at the entrance, then at her workplace. Security had escorted him off the property both times. After that, the trail went cold. He might have gone to his old professor, Ethan suggested. The one who supervised his doctorate. If he's desperate, that might be the only connection he has left. Professor Sullivan's office was in the Materials Science Building, a brutalist concrete block that smelled of chemicals and ambition. He was a thin man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a cautious manner. "You're Liam's sister," he said when he saw me. It wasn't a question. "You know about me. Liam talked about you. Early on, mostly. Before he started trying to pretend he didn't have a family." The professor's mouth twisted. "I was at the wedding, you know. What you said. I can't say I was surprised. Disappointed, but not surprised. Do you know where he is?" Professor Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled open a desk drawer and took out a slip of paper. "He came to see me a few days ago. Asked me to help him find a job somewhere far away. Somewhere no one would know who he was. I told him no, he needs to face what he's done, not run from it. But I did give him some money. Enough for a room for a few weeks." He pushed the paper across the desk. "An address in one of the outer neighborhoods, the kind of place where rent was paid by the week and hope was in short supply." "Thank you," I said. "Miss Chin." The professor's voice stopped me at the door. "Your brother is talented. But talent without character is just waste. He needed to hit bottom. Maybe now he has. What happens next is up to him. The address led us to a building that looked like it was held together by mildew and despair. The hallway smelled of stale cooking oil and damp. Apartment 3B had a door with peeling paint and no peephole. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder. Liam. It's Arya. A long pause. Then the sound of shuffling footsteps. The door opened a crack, and a face peered out, gaunt, unshaven, with dark circles under eyes that were rimmed with red. My brother. Arya. His voice was a croak. What are you? How did you find me? Let me in, Liam. He hesitated, then stepped back. The room beyond was barely larger than a closet. A mattress on the floor. Empty instant noodle cups everywhere. A single chair with a broken leg propped against the wall. The smell was overwhelming, sweat and despair and something rancid. Your parents are here, I said. They've been looking for you for 2 weeks. Mom's blood pressure is through the roof. Dad hasn't slept. They're terrified. Liam sank onto the mattress. His shoulders slumped. I couldn't face them. I couldn't face anyone. I've ruined everything, Arya. Everything. I didn't argue. I didn't offer comfort. I just stood there, looking at the wreckage of my brother's life, and waited. I went to see Sophia, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I begged her to take me back. She told me she never wanted to see me again. She said she'd rather marry someone poor and honest than someone who'd lie to his own family. Someone who'd throw away his own sister like garbage. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. She was right. You know that. She was completely right. I threw you away, Arya. The one person who ever really loved me unconditionally, and I threw you away because I was ashamed. Ashamed of where I came from. Ashamed of how hard you worked for me. Ashamed that I couldn't be the self-made man I pretended to be. He was crying now, ugly sobs that shook his whole frame. Part of me wanted to go to him. The old part. The part that had been taking care of him since he was 8 years old. I stayed where I was. Mom and Dad are at a motel near the station, I said. Here's the address. Go see them. Or don't. It's your choice. I took an envelope out of my bag, the cashier's check from William Sterling, which I'd deposited and partially withdrawn, and set it on the broken chair. There's enough here for a few months. Get yourself together. Find a job. Pay me back when you can. Arya. I'm not doing this for you, I said. I'm doing it for them. They don't deserve to bury their son. But this is the last time, Liam. Do you understand? The last time. After today, you're on your own. I've spent my entire adult life taking care of you. I'm done. I have to be done. He stared at me, and something in his face crumbled. I know, he whispered. I know. I don't deserve anything from you. I never did. No, I agreed. You didn't. But you got it anyway. Don't waste it. I turned and walked out. Ethan was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. He didn't ask how it went. He just fell into step beside me as I headed for the stairs. You okay? He asked. No, I said. But I will be. I didn't hear from Liam for 3 months after that. My parents called once to tell me they'd gone home. Liam had come to the motel the morning after I'd seen him. They'd talked, really talked, for the first time in years, and then they'd gone back together. Mom said he'd found a job at a local factory, something related to his field but entry-level. He was paying off his debts. He'd stopped drinking. He was in therapy. Good for him, I said, and meant it. But I didn't call him. My own life was taking shape in ways I'd never allowed myself to imagine. The job was everything I was good at: sourcing, negotiating, building relationships. Ethan gave me more responsibility every month, and I rose to meet it. The apartment became a home. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand. I bought clothes that weren't on sale. I opened a savings account that was for me, just me, and watched the balance grow with a satisfaction that bordered on giddy. And Ethan. Ethan was patient in a way that made my heart ache. He never pushed, but he was always there, at the office, at dinner, on the other end of the phone when I couldn't sleep. He remembered how I took my coffee. He knew when I needed to talk and when I needed silence. He looked at me like I was something precious, something worth waiting for. One evening in late spring, we were walking along the river after a work dinner. The city lights were reflected in the water, 1,000 shards of gold. Ethan stopped walking. "Aria." I turned. His expression was serious, the way it got before a big negotiation. "What is it?" "I've been waiting," he said. "Patiently, I think. But I need to know, is there a future here? For us? Because if there isn't, I need to start making my peace with that. But if there is..." He trailed off, uncharacteristically uncertain. "If there is, I'd like to stop pretending I'm not in love with you. I've been in love with you since we were 19 years old. I don't think that's going to change." The river murmured below us. A breeze lifted the hair off my neck. And I realized, standing there with this man who'd seen me at my absolute worst and never flinched, that I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of wanting things for myself. I wasn't afraid of being happy. "There's a future," I said. "I don't know exactly what it looks like yet. But I know I want you in it." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. That summer, my phone rang with a number I almost didn't recognize. My brother's. I almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity, maybe, or the faint stubborn hope that people could change, made me pick up. "Hey," I said. "Hey." His voice was different. Steadier. "I know you said not to call. And I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. But I wanted you to know, I paid off the last of my debt today. All of it. Every dollar you ever gave me." I was quiet for a moment. "That's good, Liam." And I wanted to say, "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. It'll never be enough. But I'm sorry, Aria. For everything. For the years of taking you for granted. For the wedding. For making you feel like you didn't matter. You were the best thing in my life, and I was too blind to see it." I didn't say anything. I wasn't ready to forgive him. Maybe I never would be, not completely. But I could hear the truth in his voice, the hard one, painful truth of someone who'd finally looked in the mirror and didn't like what he saw. "I'm glad you're doing better," I said at last. "Take care of yourself, Liam. You too, Aria. You too." I hung up and stood at my window for a long time, watching the city glitter below. My city now. My life. My future. Some wounds heal. Some don't. But you can learn to live with the scars. You can learn to carry them without letting them weigh you down. I turned from the window and picked up my phone to call Ethan. We had dinner plans, and I didn't want to be late. 3 years later. The cafe on the ground floor of Ethan's building, our building now, made the best flat white I'd ever tasted. I was at our usual corner table, reviewing fabric samples on my tablet, when my phone buzzed with a video call. Liam. I answered. His face appeared on the screen, and for a moment I was struck by how much he'd changed. Healthier. More solid. The anxious edge that used to shadow his expression had softened into something calmer. Hey, sis. Got a minute? For you. Maybe two. He grinned. The grin looked good on him. I wanted to show you something. He tilted the phone, and the camera swung to show a small workshop, machines I didn't recognize, raw materials on shelves, and a whiteboard covered in diagrams. My new place. I've been developing a polymer composite. Lightweight, high durability. There's a sporting goods company interested in licensing it. Liam, that's amazing. I know. His voice was quiet with wonder. I never thought I'd be excited about materials science again. But I am. And I wanted to thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. Even when you should have. Even when I deserved it. He paused. I know things between us will never be the same as they were when we were kids. I made sure of that. But I'm trying to be someone you can be proud of now. Someone who deserves a sister like you. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I've always been proud of you, Liam. Even when you made it hard. That was never the problem. I know. The problem was that I wasn't proud of myself. Or where I came from. Or the people who got me here. He took a deep breath. I'm working on it. The therapist says these things take time. They do. I smiled. But it looks like you're on your way. We talked a little longer, about his work, about mom and dad, about the small, quiet life he was building. When we hung up, I sat for a moment with my cold coffee and my full heart. Ethan appeared beside the table, sliding into the chair across from me. Was that Liam? Yeah. He's got a workshop. He's developing some kind of fancy plastic. It sounds legitimately impressive. Good for him. Ethan reached across the table and took my hand. Ready to go. We've got a plane to catch. We were flying to Milan for Fashion Week, my first time in Europe, my first time at the big show. I'd spent months preparing, coordinating with suppliers and designers, making sure everything was perfect. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was my life, and I'd built it myself. Not entirely by myself, of course. Ethan had been there every step of the way. So had my team at work. So, in their own complicated way, had my family. I was learning that, by myself, was a myth, a story people told to feel more in control. The truth was messier and more beautiful. We are all made of the people who've shaped us, for better and worse. I was made of my parents' sacrifices, even the ones that had burdened me. I was made of my brother's failures, and his slow, stumbling redemption. I was made of Ethan's steady love, and Jenny's loyal friendship, and every customer who'd walked into my tiny first shop and trusted me with their money. And I was made of my own choices, the hard ones, the painful ones, the ones that had finally put me first. Ready, I said, and let Ethan pull me to my feet. Outside, the city was golden in the late afternoon light. A taxi waited at the curb. Somewhere across town, my brother was in his workshop, building something new. Somewhere farther away, my parents were tending their garden and learning, slowly, to let their children be adults. And I was here, on the brink of an adventure, holding the hand of a man who'd loved me for nearly half my life. I was 35 years old. I had scars. I had stories. I had a future I'd never dared to imagine. And I was just getting started,